All right, let's get right into it. For months now, you've probably seen the headlines. Europe has been getting hammered by this relentless series of storms, turning quiet rivers into raging torrents and entire towns into floodplains. We're going to break down what's happening, why it's happening, and most importantly, what it means for the continent's future.
But before we dive into all the big picture science and the shocking numbers, let's just ground ourselves in what this is really about. It's about people. This quote from The Guardian just hits so hard because it reminds us that behind every single statistic, there's a personal loss. There's a community that's been changed forever.
So, let's start with the immediate cause of all this chaos. You see, this wasn't just one bad storm. This was a whole season of them, hitting one after another, with absolutely no time to recover. I mean, just look at this timeline. From October straight through to February, meteorologists were literally running through the alphabet with storm names. You had Alice, Benjamin, Claudia, then David, Amelia, Francis. By the time January and February rolled around, they were coming in packs of 5 at a time. It was just this constant, nonstop barrage that left no breathing room for the land or the people on it.
And this constant pressure, well, it had absolutely devastating consequences. In Malaga, a teacher named Francisco Zia Bravo and a cafe owner, Antonio Morales Serrano, were just driving home. These guys had been friends since they were kids, but the intense rains turned a river they'd known their entire lives into a killer. Their story is just a tragic, painful reminder of the very real human cost behind all of these events.
Okay, so that's what happened. Now let's get into the really interesting part, the why. What was going on with the atmosphere and on the ground that created this perfect storm for catastrophic flooding? Well, it all starts way up in the atmosphere, with something called the jet stream. The easiest way to think of it is as a highway for weather systems. But lately, that highway shifted south, and it basically created a direct pipeline for storm after storm to just slam right into the Iberian Peninsula, France, and the UK. It was like a conveyor belt of bad weather, and it was pointed right at Europe.
So you have that pressure from above, and it was met with a massive problem on the ground. With all that rain falling relentlessly, the soil reached a state of total saturation. So what does that actually mean? Well, picture a sponge. The first time you put it under the tap, it soaks up a lot of water, right? But once it's completely full, every single new drop just spills right over the side. That is exactly what happened to the soil all over Europe. It just couldn't absorb one more drop, so every little bit of new rain became instant and incredibly dangerous runoff.
And this isn't just some theory. You can actually see it in the data. Now, this graph looks pretty complex, but don't worry about the details. The key takeaway is simple. Look at the historical models on the left. You see a mix of causes for floods. But as we look at the future scenarios on the right, the models show that floods caused by this soil water excess, basically that overflowing sponge we talked about, become a much more dominant cause of disaster. The very mechanics of how floods happen are being rewritten right before our eyes.
And get this, it's not a one-size-fits-all problem across the whole continent. Research is showing two totally different paths to the same disastrous outcome. In Northern Europe, the issue is becoming more and more about rain falling on already wet, saturated ground. But down in the Mediterranean, they're seeing a huge spike in floods caused by these extreme, short bursts of rain hitting dry, hard-packed ground that can't absorb water quickly either. Two different problems, same terrible result.
You know, this isn't just a weather story. Not at all. It's a massive economic story. Because after the water finally recedes, the financial devastation is what's left behind. And it just cascades through every single level of society.
Let's talk numbers for a second. Just the flash floods in Spain back in 2024, they caused an estimated loss of over 3.5 billion euros. And that was just the first wave of insurance claims. The real number is likely much higher. And this wasn't some isolated event. Right next door in Portugal, the damage from the storms in early 2026 was estimated at over $4 billion. We're talking about catastrophic economic hits happening one right after the other.
But honestly, those giant numbers can almost hide the real story, which is how this damage just ripples through the entire economy. We're talking about 4,500 businesses in just one region of Spain being affected, with half of them facing the real risk of having to shut down for good. Farmers lost their crops, insurance costs are about to skyrocket for everyone, and even the EU's own emergency piggy bank, the Solidarity Fund, is being described as critically threatened because it's being drained by disaster after disaster.
And as this slide shows, the true cost is so much bigger than just the initial repair bills. You have to factor in all the indirect costs, like a hit to the country's GDP, lost market opportunities, environmental damage, you name it. The cost of inaction is really a debt that just gets passed on to the next generation.
So, all of this brings us to the really big picture question. These events are happening. We know they're getting worse. So, Is Europe actually ready for what's coming?
Let's just put it out there plainly. Is the continent financially prepared to adapt to this new, much more volatile climate reality? Well, the data suggests a pretty worrying answer.
This graph really tells the whole story. See that green line climbing slowly at the bottom? That's the actual money being spent on climate adaptation. And that massive shaded area above it, that's the estimated need. There is a vast and growing chasm between what we're doing and what we need to be doing. We are simply not investing at the scale this problem demands.
But here's the thing that makes this so incredibly urgent. According to the European Environment Agency, Europe is the fastest warming continent on the planet. Since the 1980s, it's been warming at roughly twice the global average rate. This isn't some distant threat. It's happening right here, right now, and it's happening faster than anywhere else.
Look, this isn't just me saying this. The EU's own scientists are sounding the alarm loud and clear. Their official assessment says it all. Policies are not keeping up, our preparedness is insufficient, and many of these risks, including flooding, have already reached critical levels. It's a direct warning from the experts that the current approach just isn't working.
So what does this all add up to? It's about understanding that these aren't just a series of isolated incidents. They're all symptoms of a new, deeply interconnected reality. Now, this diagram looks super complicated, I know, but you don't need to read every single line. Just follow the threads. See how something like coastal flooding over on the left snakes its way over to affect transport, public finances, and energy? A flood isn't just a flood anymore. It's a cascade, a domino effect that hits our food supply, our health, and our entire economy.
And this brings us to a final, absolutely chilling thought from Conchi Navarro, the head teacher who lost her colleague in those Spanish floods. After she'd endured a winter of unbelievable rain and loss, her mind immediately shifted to the next threat. This isn't a single crisis anymore. It's a year-round cycle of extremes.
And that leaves all of us with a fundamental question for the future. After a season spent literally underwater, the continent is being forced to learn how to swim. But as the seasons turn, the next crisis is already on the horizon. Is Europe truly prepared for the fires to come?